pull. I'm gonna spread the legs as wide as I can. Joey, now is not the time.
Sorry.
Some TV shows didn't just end. Their legacies got sideswiped, steamrolled, or straight up abandoned by networks trying to squeeze one last drop of magic from a classic. And with that, we got some of the most forgettable, ill-advised, and downright bizarre sitcom spin-offs in television history. Today, we're counting down 18 embarrassing spin-offs that deserve to be forgotten. Short-lived disasters that never got a real shot and probably shouldn't have in the first place. 1. The Brady Bunch Hour.
Wait a minute here now. Why don't you pick on somebody your own size?
Oh, of course. How thoughtless of me.
In the mid-70s, variety shows were all the rage. Donnie and Marie, Sonny and Cher, everyone had one. So, some network executive had a brilliant galaxy-brained idea. Why not take the beloved cast of the recently canceled sitcom, The Brady Bunch, and give them their own variety hour? What could possibly go wrong? The answer was The Brady Bunch Hour, one of the most bizarre and universally panned television shows of all time. The show featured the entire original cast except for Eve Plum, who wisely refused to participate and was replaced by a fake Jan, Gary Reichel, performing cheesy song and dance numbers and painfully unfunny skits. The premise itself was a fever dream. The family is given their own variety show on ABC, and each episode shows them preparing for and performing it. This led to surreal moments where the actors were playing the characters, who were then playing themselves hosting a show. The deeper you look, the stranger it gets. The show was a creative train wreck, a cynical attempt to cash in on the Brady name that had none of the charm or heart of the original sitcom. It was canceled after just 9 excruciating episodes and is now remembered as a legendary piece of television malpractice, a show so bad it has to be seen to be believed. Robert Reed, who played Mike Brady, reportedly hated the show so much he would drink heavily before and during tapings, often clashing with the producers over the terrible quality of the scripts. The Brady Bunch Hour was a musical nightmare, but our next spin-off took a beloved character from All in the Family and gave her a show that was a pale imitation of the original. 2. Gloria.
I'm Clark V. Yulee Jr.
Gloria Bunker-Stivic.
Oh.
I'm the new vet assistant.
You're the new what?
All in the Family was a television revolution, a show that spawned multiple successful and acclaimed spin-offs, including Maude and The Jeffersons. It was a true television dynasty. But then there was Gloria. After her character, Gloria Stivic, divorced the meathead on the spin-off Archie Bunker's Place, Sally Struthers was given her own series. The show saw Gloria moving to upstate New York with her son Joey to work as a veterinary assistant for 2 bumbling vets. The premise was simple enough, but the show lacked any of the edge, wit, or social commentary that had made All in the Family a masterpiece. What people miss is this key detail. The show was a fairly generic, run-of-the-mill sitcom that felt completely disconnected from the groundbreaking universe it came from. Gloria, who had been a complex, fiery, and often political character, was watered down into a standard sitcom mom dealing with standard sitcom problems like wacky misunderstandings with her eccentric boss. Despite a decent time slot and the immense star power of Sally Struthers, the show failed to find an audience and was canceled after 1 season. It was a rare miss from the Norman Lear television factory, a spin-off that proved that not every character, even from a legendary show, is meant to stand on their own. The show felt safe and toothless, which was the one thing an All in the Family spin-off should never be, making it an embarrassing and forgettable entry in an otherwise legendary franchise. Gloria was a forgettable footnote, but our next spin-off took the most iconic TV character of all time and put him in a show that completely misunderstood what made him great. 3. The Fonz and the Happy Days Gang.
Yeah, and I'm Martha Fonzarelli at your service.
Hey, what about us?
Oh yeah, they're at your service too.
In the late 70s and early 80s, Saturday morning cartoons were a big business, and studios were desperate for established characters to build shows around. So, some genius at Hanna-Barbera decided to take Fonzie, the coolest cat in Milwaukee, and turn him into a time-traveling cartoon hero. The result was The Fonz and the Happy Days Gang. The show saw Fonzie, Richie, and Ralph Malph, along with an anthropomorphic dog named Mr. Cool, accidentally getting trapped in a time machine built by a girl from the future named Cupcake. Nobody saw this coming, but each week the gang would bounce around through different historical periods, from ancient Rome to the far future, trying to get back to 1957 Milwaukee. The show was a bizarre and nonsensical attempt to cash in on the popularity of Happy Days and the sci-fi craze of the era. The animation was cheap, the stories were silly, and the entire premise was a complete betrayal of the down-to-earth, nostalgic charm of the original sitcom. It was a show that took the coolest character on television, a guy whose whole thing was being effortlessly cool in a grounded 1950s setting, and made him deeply, deeply uncool. The plots were absurd, with Fonzie using his signature eye and a snap of his fingers to fix time machines or charm Cleopatra. It ran for 2 seasons before being mercifully put out of its misery. It was a cynical cash grab of the highest order. Fonzie's cartoon was a bizarre misstep, but our next entry is a spin-off of a spin-off. A show so unnecessary, it felt like a Russian nesting doll of bad ideas. 4. Anos.
And I'm giving you both a direct order. You get out there on patrol, so mount up.
Yes, sir, Mr. Hawk.
Yes, sir, Mr. Hulk.
In the world of the Dukes of Hazzard, Deputy Enos Strat was the gentle, kind-hearted lawman who was always reluctantly chasing the Duke boys. He was a popular supporting character, known for his naive charm and his unrequited crush on Daisy Duke. In 1980, the producers decided to spin Enos off into his own series. The show saw him leave Hazard County for the big city, joining the LAPD. The premise was a classic fish-out-of-water story, with the naive country deputy trying to solve crimes in the gritty urban jungle of Los Angeles. You might think that's all, but wait. The show was surprisingly serious in tone, often dealing with violent crimes that felt completely at odds with the light-hearted, cartoonish world of the Dukes of Hazzard. The character of Enos, who was a great comedic foil, struggled to carry a show as a serious dramatic lead. The charm of his naivete in Hazard County just came across as incompetence in the big city. Despite a strong start, the ratings quickly faded, and the show was canceled after 1 season. Enos promptly returned to his job in Hazard County, where he was immediately demoted back to deputy. Another failed spin-off character welcomed back to the parent show with little explanation. It was an experiment that proved that some characters just don't work outside of their natural habitat. Enos couldn't make it in the big city, but our next spin-off took a minor character from Welcome Back, Cotter, and gave him a starring role that nobody wanted. 5. Mr. T and Tina.
It should look like it's being blown by unseen winds.
How's that?
Welcome Back, Cotter was a show built on its ensemble of hilarious sweat hogs. But for its spin-off, the producers didn't choose Vinnie Barbarino or Freddie Boom Boom Washington. They chose Mr. Takahashi, a Japanese inventor played by Pat Morita. The resulting sitcom, Mr. T and Tina, saw Mr. T move his family to Chicago to work for a brilliant but scatterbrained scientist. The show was a cringe-worthy collection of tired ethnic stereotypes and broad, unfunny jokes. The plots revolved around cultural misunderstandings that felt dated even at the time, and the laugh track worked overtime to sell jokes that simply weren't funny. And then everything flips upside down. The show was so bad that it was canceled after just 5 episodes, making it one of the biggest flops of the entire decade. It was a stunning miscalculation, a show that took a talented actor and a minor character and stranded them in a sea of terrible writing. Pat Morita, of course, would go on to achieve cinematic immortality as Mr. Miyagi in The Karate Kid, proving that his talent was never the issue. But Mr. T and Tina remains a bizarre and forgettable stain on his otherwise impressive career. It was a show so embarrassing, it's a miracle it even made it to air at all. Mr. T's show was a disaster, but our next entry is a spin-off that was so bad, its own star has spent decades disowning it. 6. The Ropers.
Stan, are you drinking beer in the can again?
No, I'm drinking it right here in the living room.
On the classic sitcom Three's Company, Stanley and Helen Roper were the quintessential nosy, bickering landlords. Played by the brilliant Norman Fell and Audra Lindley, their constant jabs at each other and their suspicious yet oblivious relationship with their tenants were a highlight of the show. They were so popular that the network decided to give them their own spin-off, The Ropers. The show saw Stanley and Helen move to a stuffy, upscale neighborhood after Helen puts her foot down and demands a better life. The premise was a classic fish out of water story, with the working-class Ropers trying to fit in with their wealthy, snobbish neighbors. Here's where it all takes a sharp turn. The show was a moderate success, but it lacked the magic of Three's Company. The Ropers, who were brilliant as supporting characters, struggled to be compelling leads. Their one-note dynamic, which was hilarious in small doses, became sad and repetitive as the focus of a whole show. Norman Fell was reportedly unhappy with the move, correctly fearing that leaving a #1 show was a mistake. After 2 seasons, the show was canceled. The fallout was messy. The producers of Three's Company had promised Fell and Lindley they could return to the original show if the spin-off failed within a year. But by the time The Ropers was canceled, they had already been replaced by the new landlord, Mr. Furley, and the offer was off the table. The Ropers was a risky move that backfired, but our next spin-off took the other main character from Three's Company and stranded him in an even worse show. 7. Three's a Crowd.
I'm so excited.
I can't wait to see it.
Why? You were hardly in it. What was it, 1 word?
2 words.
That many.
Just when you thought the legacy of Three's Company couldn't get more embarrassing than the Ropers, along came Three's a Crowd. After the parent show ended its run, with Jack Tripper finally settling down with his girlfriend, Vicky, ABC decided to spin him off into a new series. The show saw Jack and Vicky move in together, but there was a catch. Vicky's disapproving, wealthy father, who owned their apartment building, lived downstairs and made it his mission to break them up. It all boils down to this one twist. The show took the joyous, chaotic, and liberated spirit of Three's Company and turned it into a bland, conventional, and deeply unfunny show about domestic squabbles. The clever misunderstandings and physical comedy were replaced with tired jokes about marriage and in-laws. John Ritter, a genius of physical comedy, was completely wasted in a show that gave him nothing to do. The series was a ratings disappointment and was canceled after 1 season, an embarrassing end for one of TV's most iconic characters. It proved once and for all that the magic of Three's Company was in the 3, not the 1. Jack Tripper's spin-off was a sad end, but our next show was a sequel to a beloved classic that was missing its most important ingredient. 8. The Golden Palace.
The safe! Well, I don't know where the safe is. I'll have to call our manager, Roland.
No.
Oh, that's okay. He won't mind.
When B. Arthur decided to leave the Golden Girls after 7 incredibly successful seasons, the remaining cast and producers were faced with a dilemma. Instead of ending the show, they decided to retool it. The result was The Golden Palace, a spin-off that saw Blanche, Rose, and Sophia selling their beloved Miami home and buying a hotel. B. Arthur's character, Dorothy, was written out, having gotten married in the finale. But right when it seemed like the end, that's when the real story started. The new show added Cheech Marine and a young Don Cheadle to the cast and tried to recapture the magic of the original. The problem was, the magic was gone. The delicate chemistry of the original 4 actresses was the heart and soul of the show, and without Dorothy's sharp, sarcastic presence to ground the others, the dynamic felt off. The hotel setting felt forced, and the new characters never fully integrated. Despite the immense talent of the remaining cast, the show struggled to find its footing and was canceled by CBS after just one season. It was a sad and forgettable end to three of television's most iconic characters, an embarrassing attempt to keep a show on life support when it was already gone. The Golden Palace was a sad end to a classic, but our next show was a spin-off so ill-conceived it tried to turn a wacky alien into a serious dramatic actor. 9. That 80s Show.
Jim Morrison is a god.
A god who thought my breasts looked like mushrooms.
In the wake of the massive success of That 70s Show, a brilliant sitcom that perfectly captured the look, feel, and sound of a specific decade, Fox decided to try and catch lightning in a bottle twice. The result was That 80s Show. While not a direct spin-off with shared characters, it was created by the same team and marketed as a spiritual successor, designed to do for the 80s what the original had done for the 70s. The show centered on a group of young people in San Diego navigating life in the decade of big hair, neon clothes, and new wave music. The wild part is, the show was a complete and utter failure. It tried to replicate the formula of the original, the quirky group of friends, the nostalgic setting, the pop culture references. But it had none of the charm, wit, or heart. The characters were thin stereotypes, the jokes were lame, and the show felt less like a loving tribute to the 80s and more like a cheap, soulless imitation. It was a classic case of a network trying to clone a hit, but completely misunderstanding what made the original special. The show was a ratings disaster and was canceled after just 13 episodes, an embarrassing flop that proved that you can't just manufacture nostalgia. That 80s Show was a soulless imitation, but our next spin-off took a beloved character from an animated classic and gave him a show that was a pale imitation of the original. 10. After Happily Ever After.
But my client over here, Mr. John Starks of the New York Knickerbockers.
In the world of 90s television, the Wayans family was comedy royalty. In living color was a cultural phenomenon. So when brothers Sean and Marlon Wayans were given their own sitcom, The Wayans Bros, it was a solid hit. But what about the other family members? That's where After Happily Ever After comes in. This bizarre and forgotten sitcom starred an older Wayans brother, Keenan Ivory Wayans, as a former TV star whose life falls apart after his wife leaves him. The show's gimmick was that it would frequently cut away to parodies of classic sitcoms, with Keenan and his ex-wife reenacting their marital problems in the style of The Honeymooners or The Brady Bunch. It was a high-concept idea that was, in reality, a complete mess. The parodies were unfunny, the main story was depressing, and the show felt like a desperate attempt to find a vehicle for a talented star who deserved better. It was canceled after just a handful of episodes, a strange and forgettable footnote in the otherwise impressive legacy of the Wayans family. The show's failure to connect with audiences proved that even a family full of comedic geniuses can have a rare and very public miss. The Wayans family had a rare miss, but our next spin-off was a reboot of a classic that tried to capture the magic with a new generation and failed spectacularly. 11. The New Leave. It to Beaver.
Now, why don't you get off my front porch before people think we're having an affair?
I could stand here for the next 10 years, and people would still know I'm not that desperate.
Leave It to Beaver was the quintessential wholesome family sitcom of the 50s and 60s. So in the 80s, the producers decided to see what the Cleaver family was up to. The result was a TV movie called Still the Beaver, which was so successful it led to a new series, The New Leave It to Beaver. The show featured the original cast, including Jerry Mathers as the Beaver and Tony Dow as Wally, now all grown up with families of their own. From the outside, it seemed simple, until you dig deeper. The show tried to replicate the gentle, lesson-of-the-week charm of the original. But in the cynical, fast-paced world of the 1980s, it felt hopelessly dated. The storylines were bland, the new child actors lacked the charm of the original cast, and the entire enterprise felt like a pale imitation of a beloved classic. Despite running for over 100 episodes on cable, the show has been largely forgotten, a nostalgic experiment that proved that you can't go home again, especially when home is a black and white world of milk and cookies. It was a show out of time, a relic trying to compete in a world that had long since moved on. The new Beavers were a shadow of the old, but our next show was a spin-off of a soap opera that tried to be a comedy, with disastrous results. 12. The Colbys.
I am mistress of this house, and I am supposed to run things round here.
This is not your house. It is not my house. It is the Colby home, and Jeff is a Colby.
In the 1980s, the primetime soap opera dynasty was a ratings juggernaut, a glorious spectacle of big hair, big shoulder pads, and big drama. The show's main rivals were the Colby family, another clan of wealthy, backstabbing oil tycoons. The producers decided the Colbys were so popular they deserved their own show. The result was The Colbys, one of the most expensive and high-profile flops in television history. The show starred Charlton Heston and Barbara Stanwyck, two legends of Hollywood's golden age, as the heads of the Colby clan. But just when it all seemed figured out, the show, despite its massive budget and star power, was a creative and commercial disaster. The storylines were a rehash of Dynasty's greatest hits. The characters were uninteresting, and the show lacked the campy, over-the-top fun of its parent series. Its most famous moment was a truly bizarre season finale cliffhanger, where one of the main characters is abducted by a UFO. Yes, you read that right. The show was canceled after 2 seasons, its all-star cast unable to save it from its own mediocrity. It was a spectacular and expensive failure that proved that even a massive budget can't save a show with no soul. The Colbys was an expensive failure, but our next entry is perhaps the most infamous spin-off of all time, a show so bad it has become a punchline. 13. Baywatch Nights.
When someone yells help, I jump in with both feet. And I hope you do too, as we introduce a new series of private eye adventures called Baywatch Nights.
You heard that right. Baywatch, the show about slow-motion running and questionable acting, had a spin-off, and it was insane. In Baywatch Nights, David Hasselhoff's character, Mitch Buchanan, decides to open up a private investigation agency that operates at night. But here's where everything flips upside down. The first season was a relatively straightforward, if boring, detective show. But when the ratings tanked, the producers, in a moment of sheer, unadulterated panic, decided to completely retool the show for Season 2. It was no longer a detective show. It was now a rip-off of The X-Files. Mitch and his team started investigating paranormal phenomena, aliens, sea monsters, werewolves, you name it. It was a bizarre, nonsensical, and utterly hilarious train wreck of a show. It was canceled halfway through its second season, leaving the world to wonder if Mitch ever did find that sea monster. It remains one of the most embarrassing and baffling spin-offs in television history, a true monument to desperation and bad ideas. Baywatch Nights was a paranormal disaster, but our next show took a beloved character from an animated classic and gave him a spin-off that was a pale imitation of the original. 14. Pinky, Elmira, and the Brain Pinky.
I hope you're prepared, Pinky, for tonight's plan to take over the world promises to be extraordinary. Pinky?
Pinky and the Brain was a brilliant animated sitcom, a show about 2 genetically engineered lab mice, one a genius bent on world domination, the other a lovable idiot. It was smart, it was funny, and it was a critical darling. Then, the network, in its infinite wisdom, decided the show needed to be more like Tiny Toon Adventures. They forced the creators to retool the show, adding a third main character, Elmira Duff, the obnoxious, animal-abusing little girl from Tiny Toons. The new show, Pinky, Elmira, and the Brain, was a creative nightmare. And then something totally unexpected happened. The intricate, clever plots about taking over the world were replaced by tired, slapstick jokes about Elmira squeezing the brain too hard. The show lost all of its wit and charm and became a generic, unfunny kids' cartoon. The creators hated it, the voice actors hated it, and the fans hated it. It was canceled after just 13 episodes, a heartbreaking end for two of animation's greatest characters. It was a textbook example of network meddling at its absolute worst, a decision so bad it felt like a deliberate act of sabotage. Pinky, Elmira, and the Brain was a creative nightmare. But our next spin-off was a reboot of a classic that tried to capture the magic with a new generation and failed spectacularly. 15. Frasier.
Surprise!
Dad, you're at my door. Unannounced.
No, there's a shorter way to say that. Surprise!
Hold on, Frasier? A flop? Absolutely not. It was one of the most successful and acclaimed spin-offs in history. But this isn't about that Frasier. This is about the Frasier that almost was. When Cheers was ending, the producers knew Kelsey Grammer's character, Frasier Crane, was a star, but they had no idea what to do with him. What people miss is this key detail. The original pitch for the spin-off was completely different. It would have featured Frasier still running his private psychiatry practice in Boston. But the twist was that he would be bedridden after a terrible accident, forced to conduct his practice from his apartment. The show would have revolved around the various characters who came to visit him. Thankfully, this bleak and confining concept was rejected. The producers went back to the drawing board, moved the character to Seattle, gave him a brother and a father, and created the beloved classic we know today. But for a moment, the world was almost robbed of one of its greatest sitcoms by a truly terrible initial idea. Frasier's show was saved by a great idea, but our next entry is a spin-off so bad, it's remembered as one of the worst television shows of all time. 16. The Tortellis.
Give me one.
Give you one what?
Your best shot. Right here. Cold cock me, honey. Let's go.
You don't really expect me to strike you.
$6 an hour.
On the iconic sitcom Cheers, Carla Tortelli was a force of nature, a wisecracking, perpetually pregnant waitress with a brood of unruly children. Her sleazy, lounge lizard ex-husband, Nick Tortelli, played by the great Dan Hedaya, was a recurring source of hilarious torment. In 1987, NBC decided that what America really needed was an entire show about this dysfunctional family. The result was The Tortellis. The show followed Nick and his ditzy new wife, Loretta, as they moved to Las Vegas to start a new life. Carla's sister, Charlotte, even tagged along for reasons that were never entirely clear. And then came the part nobody expected. The show was a complete and utter dud. The characters, who were hilarious in small doses as antagonists for the gang at Cheers, were grating and unlikable as the leads of their own show. The jokes were tired, the premise was thin, and the Vegas setting felt cheap. The real shocker was still to come. Despite being a spin-off of the #1 show on television, The Tortellis was a ratings catastrophe. It was canceled after just 13 episodes. Nick Tortelli would later return to Cheers for a few more guest appearances, with his failed Vegas adventure never mentioned again. A classic case of a spin-off being so bad that even the parent show pretended it never happened. The Tortellis was a Vegas-sized bust, but our next spin-off took the goofy doorman from a popular sitcom and sent him to the big city in a show that lasted less than a month. 17. Checking In.
Hi.
Hi. Something I can do for you?
Okay. No.
In the groundbreaking 70s sitcom, The Jeffersons, Florence Johnston was the sharp-tongued, wisecracking maid who was more than a match for her boss, George Jefferson. But there was another memorable supporting character, the hotel doorman, Harry Bentley, played by the charming Paul Benedict. He was the Jeffersons' quirky, good-natured English neighbor who had a habit of dropping in at the most inconvenient times. In 1981, the producers decided to give Bentley his own show, Checking In. The premise saw Bentley leave his job as a UN translator to become the manager of a chaotic New York hotel. It was supposed to be easy until it wasn't. The show was a disaster. The character of Bentley, who worked perfectly as a quirky neighbor, simply wasn't strong enough to carry his own series. The hotel setting was generic, and the supporting cast was forgettable. The show was so poorly received that it was canceled after just 4 episodes. Benedict quickly returned to his role on The Jeffersons, with the explanation that his new hotel had burned down, a meta-joke about the spin-off's fiery crash. It was one of the fastest and most definitive flops of the era, a show that checked in and checked out in the blink of an eye. Checking In was a spectacular failure, but our final entry is perhaps the most infamous spin-off of all time, a show so bad it has become a cautionary tale. 18. Joey.
18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. What the hell are you doing? Oh, you're jealous, buddy? It doesn't stop there. 27, 28.
When Friends ended its historic decade-long run, it was the biggest show on television. NBC was desperate to keep the magic alive. So they took the show's most one-dimensional and least developed character, the lovable dimwit Joey Tribbiani, and gave him his own spin-off. The show, simply titled Joey, saw him move to Los Angeles to pursue his acting career. And here's where everything flips upside down. The show was a catastrophe. Joey, who was a hilarious supporting character, was completely incapable of carrying a show on his own. The writers tried to make him more mature and responsible, but in doing so, they stripped away everything that had made the character funny in the first place. The supporting cast was weak, the jokes were lame, and the show had none of the heart or chemistry of Friends. It was a cynical, hollow cash grab, and audiences saw right through it. After a promising start, the ratings went into a freefall. The show was pulled from the air midway through its second season, its final episodes never even airing in the U.S. It was a humiliating end for a beloved character and a cautionary tale for any network that thinks it can recreate magic.